In a world of 8 billion people, there are conditions so rare that they appear almost mythical, so unlikely that they strike only one child out of every 4 to 8 million born. And yet, when this condition appears, it carries a weight far greater than its numbers suggest. Progeria, one of the rarest genetic disorders known to medicine, is a reminder that even a single mutation can rewrite the meaning of childhood. It begins quietly, often just a few months after birth. A baby who seems perfectly healthy slowly begins to display signs that something in the body is unfolding too quickly, far faster than nature ever intended. Progeria, officially known as Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, is not a disease of aging. It is a disease of accelerated aging. It compresses a lifetime into a decade, forcing children to experience in 10 years what the human body is built to endure over 80. Across the entire planet, at any given moment, fewer than 200 children live with this condition. Their stories circle the globe because of how rare and how devastating the diagnosis is. Each case becomes its own universe of medical puzzles, scientific challenges, and emotional battles, followed closely by families, doctors, and researchers who know they are confronting one of biology's most unforgiving mysteries. Progeria's rarity is not what makes it heartbreaking. It is the contrast. A young child filled with energy, curiosity, and intelligence, living inside a body that is aging at a speed it cannot escape. From the outside, the condition seems almost impossible. How can a genetic glitch accelerate time itself? How can a single mutation bend the trajectory of life so dramatically? Yet this is the cruel design of progeria, a rapid unraveling of the body's structural foundations, driven by a microscopic flaw present from birth. This is not just a medical disorder. It is a collision between childhood and old age, happening in real time.
The story of progeria begins more than a century ago, long before scientists understood genes, DNA, or even the biological mechanics of aging. In 1875, a British physician named Jonathan Hutchinson encountered a child whose body seemed to be aging far faster than nature intended. The child's skin, bones, and facial features resembled those of an elderly person, yet he was only a few years old. Hutchinson documented the case carefully, realizing he was looking at something medicine had never seen before. It was the first recorded glimpse of a disorder that defied every medical expectation of the time. A decade later, in 1886, another physician, Hastings Gilford, encountered a remarkably similar case. The pattern was unmistakable. Children who should have been learning to walk and speak instead displayed characteristics associated with old age. Gilford noticed the striking resemblance between these young patients and the frailty of the elderly. He proposed a name drawn from Greek roots, progeria, meaning premature aging. The term captured both the mystery and the tragedy of the condition. As the 20th century unfolded, progeria remained one of the great enigmas of medicine. Doctors could describe it, but they could not explain it. The mechanisms of aging were unknown, the language of genetics had not yet been written, and every attempt to uncover the cause ended in unanswered questions. Children around the world occasionally appeared with the same unmistakable signs, yet no one could trace the origin of the disease. It was a puzzle scattered across continents with no key to connect its pieces. For generations, the disorder stood as a reminder of how little the scientific world understood about the passage of time within the human body. Why did some cells age normally while others seem to sprint toward breakdown? Why did progeria mimic the most severe aspects of aging but unfold at lightning speed? No theory could fully explain the phenomenon. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 2003, more than 125 years after Hutchinson first described the condition, researchers finally uncovered the truth. The entire disorder, with all its devastating consequences, traced back to a single mutation in a single gene. One change in the LMNA gene was enough to disrupt the structural integrity of the cell's nucleus, and in doing so, to accelerate aging throughout the entire body. This discovery was not just a medical milestone, it was a seismic shift in the understanding of human aging itself. For the first time, scientists could look at progeria and see not just a rare disease, but a window into the fundamental mechanics of how and why the body grows old.
At the heart of progeria lies a single flaw, so small it can only be seen under the lens of molecular genetics, yet powerful enough to rewrite the timeline of a human life. This flaw lives inside a gene known as LMNA, a blueprint that tells the cell how to build one of its most essential structures, the protective scaffolding that surrounds the nucleus. Think of it as the reinforced walls that safeguard the cell's most precious resource, its DNA. Under normal conditions, LMNA produces a protein called lamin A, a structural molecule that keeps the nucleus firm, stable, and able to divide properly. But in children with progeria, a single mutation corrupts this blueprint. Instead of creating healthy lamin A, the gene produces a fractured, toxic version called progerin, a protein that looks similar, behaves differently, and slowly sabotages every cell it touches. The moment progerin appears, the architecture of the nucleus begins to collapse. Its smooth surface wrinkles and buckles, the membrane weakens, and the genetic material inside becomes increasingly fragile. The cell begins to struggle with tasks that are fundamental to life: repairing DNA, dividing cleanly, producing collagen, and maintaining its internal balance. Day by day, the damage accumulates. DNA breaks more easily. Repairs fail more often. Cells stop dividing altogether and die far sooner than they should. What is astonishing is how closely this process mirrors natural aging. In healthy individuals, the nucleus gradually loses strength over decades. Collagen levels fall slowly. DNA damage builds up inch by inch. Blood vessels stiffen. Skin thins. Bones weaken. Aging unfolds like a long, predictable story. But in progeria, that story is compressed. Everything that should take 70 or 80 years happens in a fraction of that time. Progerin accelerates the clock, aging not just the skin, but the cardiovascular system, the bones, the immune response, and nearly every tissue in the body. It is aging, multiplied by 10. Then came the scientific revelation that reshaped the world's understanding of human biology. Researchers discovered that progerin doesn't just exist in children with progeria. It exists in tiny quantities inside every aging human being. As we grow older, our cells naturally produce small amounts of this same toxic protein. The wrinkling of the nucleus, the decline in tissue strength, the weakening of blood vessels, all of these are, in part, driven by the same biological mechanism that devastates children with progeria. In other words, progeria didn't just reveal a disease, it revealed a map of aging itself. This single mutation, found in only a handful of children worldwide, may hold one of the most important secrets in all of human biology: why we age, how our cells break down over time, and perhaps one day how we might slow that process. And for the first time in history, scientists began to understand aging not as an unavoidable mystery, but as a mechanism that might one day be controlled. The earliest signs of progeria rarely arrive with dramatic warnings. Instead, they unfold slowly, quietly, during the first years of life, at an age when most children are learning to walk, to run, to form their first words. Parents often sense something subtle at first. Their child isn't gaining weight like others. The growth curve is flatter than it should be. Doctors reassure them, saying every child grows differently. But as the months pass, the differences become more difficult to ignore. The bones begin to tell the story. The forehead appears slightly more prominent, giving the face a delicate, almost fragile shape. The jaw remains small, giving the mouth a soft, recessed look. Hair grows thin, or it doesn't grow at all, leaving the scalp exposed in a way that seems unusual for a toddler. The skin, instead of carrying the plump smoothness of early childhood, becomes thin and almost translucent. Veins trace faint blue lines across the scalp. The texture shifts toward something older, something time-worn, even though the child is only 1 or 2 years old. Movement begins to change as well. The joints stiffen, resisting the easy flexibility that children normally enjoy. Knees and elbows move with effort. Running becomes a challenge. Even the voice, often high and light, carries a softness that reflects the body's growing limitations. Yet through all these physical differences, one thing remains untouched and unmistakably strong: the child's mind. Their intelligence remains sharp, completely normal, often exceptional. They learn, explore, question, laugh, and understand the world with the full brightness of a young, curious mind. The contrast becomes almost surreal. A child whose body is aging far too quickly, while their thinking, creativity, and personality unfold exactly as they should. To parents, this contrast is both a comfort and a heartbreak. Their child sees the world with the clarity of youth, but the body they live in is quietly marching toward challenges no toddler should ever face. These early symptoms, gentle, gradual, and easy to mistake for quirks of development, are the first whispers of a condition that will shape every year to come. As the years pass, progeria reveals its full weight. What began as subtle differences in early childhood gradually transforms into a striking acceleration of aging, a pace so rapid and so relentless that the body shifts visibly from one year to the next. Bones that should be strong and flexible become fragile, almost brittle, leaving children vulnerable to fractures and hip dislocation from the smallest falls. Each step demands effort, each movement requires caution, and walking can become a delicate negotiation between balance and pain. The joints stiffen further, losing the easy glide of youth. Knees and elbows resist bending, fingers tighten, and simple actions like climbing stairs or even lifting a toy can feel like the movements of someone decades older. The skin continues to thin, losing its elasticity, forming wrinkles and folds long before adolescence. Wounds that should heal in days linger for weeks. Bruises appear easily. The body's ability to repair itself weakens year by year, mirroring the natural aging process, but at a pace 10 times faster. The teeth tell their own part of the story. They erupt late, struggle to grow properly, and sometimes fall out early. Eating can become difficult, not because of appetite, but because the physical tools of chewing and biting are failing too soon, too quickly. Meanwhile, the immune system, normally a child's strongest line of defense, begins to falter. Infections become more frequent, fevers return more often, a simple cold can take an unusually heavy toll. And then there are the silent changes, the ones happening inside the body, out of sight but not out of danger. Cholesterol levels rise far earlier than they should. Arteries, which should be wide and flexible, begin to stiffen and narrow. Blood vessels lose their resilience. The heart, forced to push blood through tightening pathways, begins to weaken under the strain. What medicine sees in these children is what it expects to see in the elderly: early atherosclerosis, reduced cardiac function, restricted circulation. Walking grows harder. Climbing steps becomes a challenge. Playing like other children is often out of reach. The fatigue comes not from lack of energy or desire, but from a body aging far too quickly for the spirit inside it. Yet through all of this, every fracture, every stiff joint, every struggle to move, the mind remains bright, eager, unbroken. The child inside these fragile bones is fully alive, aware, intelligent, and ready to embrace life despite the weight their body carries. And this is what makes the advanced stages of progeria so profoundly heartbreaking: the contrast between the unstoppable aging of the body and the undiminished youth of the soul.
In progeria, the greatest threat is not the visible aging of the skin or bones. It is the silent transformation happening deep within the cardiovascular system. While the child's body appears to age externally, the most dangerous changes unfold inside the arteries. One of the earliest and most devastating consequences of the disease is accelerated atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of blood vessels, a condition typically seen in elderly adults, not in children still learning multiplication tables. This arterial damage progresses with extraordinary speed. The vessels that should be soft and flexible begin to stiffen. Their inner walls thicken. The passageway for blood narrows year by year until the heart is forced to push harder, strain more, and fight against a resistance the body was never designed to endure at such a young age. What would normally develop slowly over decades in a 70-year-old man unfolds in a child barely old enough to start middle school. As the arteries deteriorate, the heart becomes the unwilling soldier on the front lines. It works tirelessly, pumping through vessels that no longer cooperate. Eventually, the strain becomes too great. This is why the tragedies associated with progeria rarely come from infections or bone fractures. They come suddenly and violently from cardiac events that belong to an entirely different stage of life. Most children with progeria lose their lives to heart attacks when the coronary arteries become too narrow to deliver blood, strokes when vessels in the brain are blocked or burst, heart failure when the organs simply can no longer keep up with the demand. These outcomes are heartbreaking not only because of the age of the children, but because they reflect a biological paradox: a young heart forced to carry the burdens of an aging one. The average life expectancy for a child with progeria is just 13 to 15 years. Yet in recent years, hope has begun to stretch that timeline. With newly approved treatments, improving cardiac function, and slowing arterial damage, some children have reached ages once considered impossible, 20 and even 21 years old. These extra years are not just numbers. They are birthdays, memories, milestones, moments that families once believed they would never reach.
For most parents, childhood feels like a long, gentle road. First steps, first words, birthdays that seem to stretch endlessly into the future. But for families of children with progeria, time behaves differently. It moves faster. It steals faster. Every month can feel like a year. Every milestone a reminder of how precious the next one will be. These parents watch something no mother or father should ever witness: their child growing old before they truly grow up. They see joints stiffen instead of strengthen, hair thin instead of flourish, small bodies fighting conditions meant for the elderly. The physical changes are undeniable, but the emotional weight is even heavier. Every checkup becomes a countdown, every symptom a warning, every good day a treasured gift. And the children, they are painfully aware of their reality. Despite their intelligence, often above average, they live with the understanding that the future most kids imagine may not be theirs. Yet somehow they push forward with a courage that humbles everyone around them. They laugh, they study, they build dreams that fit inside the time they have. They squeeze entire childhoods into a handful of years, learning instruments, playing sports in modified ways, joining clubs, setting goals, and refusing to let the mirror dictate their joy. This compressed childhood becomes a powerful expression of resilience. Where time is short, passion becomes big. Take Sam Burns, one of the most inspiring figures associated with the condition. Sam didn't just live with progeria, he lived above it. He gave TED Talks, played in his school's marching band, inspired documentaries, and moved millions with his words. He once said, "I want to be remembered as a kid who didn't let anything stop him." And he wasn't alone. Many children with progeria share that same fire, that same clarity about life's fragility, and the same determination to fill it with meaning. For the families, every day becomes a blend of fear and gratitude. Fear of the inevitable, gratitude for everything that still remains possible. They learn to celebrate small victories, walking without pain, a day without fatigue, a birthday reached against the odds. They build support networks with parents across the world who understand their struggle. They become experts in medicine, scheduling, therapy, nutrition, all while trying to preserve some sense of normalcy. And yet, under the weight of this rare and relentless disease, a profound truth emerges. Progeria may shorten life, but it often amplifies love. The connections become stronger, the moments more vibrant, and the courage more visible.
In the world of medicine, most battles come with a strategy: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy. Even in the toughest cancers, there is almost always a direction to fight, a treatment to attempt, a path filled with hope and measurable progress. But progeria is different, brutally different. There is no cure to remove it, no surgery that can cut it out, no drug that can fully stop the toxic protein destroying the body from within. With cancer, doctors attack a tumor. With progeria, the problem is woven into every cell, every tissue, every heartbeat. The disease doesn't grow like a mass you can target. It lives inside the blueprint of the body itself. A single corrupted gene quietly releases progerin, and once it begins accumulating, nothing can reverse the damage. It is like having time itself as the enemy, aging the child from the inside out with no pause button, no retreat, no reset. Even the best doctors in the world face a heartbreaking reality. They are not fighting to stop the disease. They are fighting to slow it down, to buy months, maybe a year, to give families more memories before the clock runs out. Progeria progresses with a speed medicine is not built to handle. Arteries stiffen as if the child were 70 years old. Bones weaken as if decades have passed.
The heart grows old long before the child learns algebra. It is a fight where the enemy is everywhere, the timeline is unforgiving, and the weapons are painfully limited. That is why progeria is often described by doctors as one of the most relentless conditions ever known.
For decades, the medical world stood helpless in front of progeria, a disease so rare that many doctors never saw a single case in their entire careers, yet so brutal that it forced science to confront one of its oldest questions: what makes the human body grow old? And because no one had the answer, the earliest battles against progeria felt less like medicine and more like trial and error in the dark. Researchers began with what little they understood. They knew the children suffered from accelerated cellular damage, so they tried antioxidants, hoping to slow the internal breakdown. When the cardiovascular complications became clearer, doctors attempted cholesterol-lowering drugs, imagining they might ease the strain on arteries aging decades too fast. Some teams designed exercise regimens, others built specialized nutritional plans, and many more tested supplements that, on paper, should have helped the body adapt. None of it worked. Because the truth was harsher than anyone expected. Progeria was not caused by lifestyle, environment, or metabolism. It was written into the DNA itself. A single mutation, a single flawed protein, and a cascade of aging that no existing treatment could interrupt. Still, the scientific community refused to surrender. They tracked every child, recorded every symptom, every test result, every heartbeat, compiling the most detailed medical profiles ever created for a rare disease. And gradually, a map began to form, a blueprint of where the disease struck hardest, how fast it progressed, and where its weak points might be hiding. Then came the turning point. Years of research exposed a crucial detail. If scientists could stop the toxic protein progerin from accumulating inside the cells, just slow it, even slightly, they might be able to slow the disease itself. It sounded impossible, but for those who had watched child after child lose the battle to time, impossible had already lost its meaning. And in 2020, after decades of persistent research, something extraordinary happened. Lonafarnib became the first approved treatment for progeria in human history. It didn't cure the mutation. It didn't reverse aging. It didn't transform the disease into something harmless. But it did weaken progerin's strongest weapon, speed. Lonafarnib reduced the buildup of progerin inside the cells, improved the elasticity of arteries that had stiffened far beyond their years, and decreased the cardiovascular strain that killed so many children far too young. One by one, the clinical studies revealed something no one thought possible. The clock began to slow. On average, children lived 2 to 3 years longer, years filled with school, friendships, birthdays, and memories their families never expected to have. In some cases, the improvements were even stronger: better energy, better mobility, fewer medical complications, and a quality of life that had never been seen before. It wasn't victory, but it was the first real advantage humanity had ever gained in a battle against a disease that accelerated time. And perhaps the most powerful thing Lonafarnib gave wasn't biological, it was psychological. For the first time, parents looked at their child and saw something stronger than fear. They saw hope, not the fragile hope of maybe, but the scientific hope of progress, of momentum, of a future where progeria might be slowed further or even stopped altogether. Lonafarmib was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the fight back, a signal to the world that progeria was no longer an untouchable mystery, just a challenge waiting for the next breakthrough. And science was already preparing for the next war.
For over a century, progeria was a disease that only moved in one direction, forward, faster, and without mercy. But now, for the first time in human history, science has begun to ask a question that once sounded like science fiction. What if we could slow aging? That question gained real momentum when researchers turned to one of the most powerful tools ever created in biology: CRISPR gene editing. Inside specialized labs, scientists began targeting the LMNA mutation directly, repairing the faulty instructions that create progerin. Early studies on mice produced results so dramatic they shook the world of genetics. The animals didn't just improve, they were effectively cured. Their arteries softened, their organs regained strength, their lifespans nearly doubled. For the first time, progeria showed a weakness, and humanity took notice. But the journey from laboratory mice to human children is long, dangerous, and filled with ethical barriers. Still, many researchers believe that within 10 to 20 years, CRISPR could become the first real attempt to erase the disease at its source, fixing the mutation before it ever launches its devastating cascade of aging. Yet gene editing isn't the only frontier. Scientists are also developing RNA-based therapies designed to silence the mutation itself. Treatments that instruct the body to produce less progerin, or none at all. Instead of fighting the downstream damage, these therapies aim to cut off the problem at the root. If there is no progerin, there is no accelerated aging. And already, in early trials, the data is promising. Lower levels of progerin in cells, more flexible arteries, improved cellular structure. Hints that we may be standing at the doorway of a medical revolution. Together, CRISPR and RNA therapy form a vision that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. A future where we don't just manage progeria, we correct it. A future where a child born with this mutation grows, learns, plays, and lives without racing against time. A future where the study of progeria doesn't just save rare children, it helps unlock the deepest biological secret of all. Why do we age? And can we choose not to? The answers are closer than ever, and for the first time, the story of progeria is beginning to sound less like a tragedy and more like the opening chapter of a medical revolution.
Long before progeria became a medical headline, aging itself was one of the greatest mysteries in biology. We could see it, measure it, fear it, yet for centuries no one truly understood why the body grows old or what breaks first as the years pass. Unexpectedly, the key to that mystery came not from studying the elderly, but from watching children age at impossible speed. Progeria forced scientists to confront aging in fast forward, revealing patterns that would normally take a lifetime to observe. The disease highlighted the central role of collagen, the protein that gives structure to skin, bones, blood vessels, and connective tissue. In progeria, when the mutated LMNA gene disrupts collagen production, the result is a collapse of physical integrity, showing researchers exactly how much of our youth depends on this single molecular network. It also exposed the vulnerability of our blood vessels. As progerin accumulates, arteries stiffen and narrow, mirroring the same cardiovascular decline that happens naturally in old age. By watching this process unfold in mere years instead of decades, scientists gained rare insight into how and why the circulatory system deteriorates over time. Even at the cellular level, progeria illuminated the mechanics of aging. Cells affected by progerin divide more slowly, repair DNA less efficiently, and slide into dysfunction far earlier than normal, offering a window into the gradual slowdown that defines the aging process in every human being. Slowly, a bold idea emerged. Progeria does not simply mimic aging, it reveals its blueprint. This realization changed the entire field of gerontology. Today, research inspired by progeria is helping scientists explore new ways to strengthen tissues, protect DNA, and preserve vascular health, not just for children with the condition, but for millions of healthy adults who will one day face the natural limits of time. In a strange and powerful twist, a disease that shortens life may one day help us extend it. Progeria, once feared as a medical catastrophe, has become a guide, pointing us toward the biological roots of aging, and perhaps, one day, toward the means to slow it down.
Behind every scientific paper, every clinical trial, and every breakthrough, there are children whose lives gave progeria a human face. Sam Burns, perhaps the most iconic, became a global symbol of strength. Despite a body aging decades ahead of schedule, he lived with an optimism so powerful it reshaped how millions understood resilience. His TED Talk, his dreams, his humor, everything about him reminded the world that a shortened life can still be a full one. Then there was Hayley O'Keefe, known worldwide as the girl who challenged time. Doctors expected only a handful of years, but she lived far beyond those predictions, traveling, advocating, and participating in research that would one day change the course of the disease. Her courage wasn't loud, it was steady, persistent, and unforgettable. And in quieter corners of the world, India, parts of Africa, rural regions where medical access is scarce, other children faced progeria without early diagnosis, often misunderstood or misidentified for years. Their stories rarely made headlines, but they shaped the global effort to improve awareness, detection, and care. These children, famous or unseen, did more than inspire sympathy. They inspired progress, becoming the emotional force that pushed scientists, doctors, and entire communities to fight harder, research deeper, and hope more fiercely. Their lives may have been short, but their impact is immeasurable.
For families, progeria is not just a diagnosis. It becomes the rhythm of everyday life. Each morning begins with routines most people never have to think about. Specialized medications, careful stretches to ease stiff joints, monitoring weight, monitoring fatigue, adjusting meals to support fragile bones and strained arteries. Every detail matters, because the smallest imbalance can ripple through a body aging far too quickly. Doctors become part of the family. Regular cardiac checkups, blood tests, vascular imaging. Parents navigate a medical landscape more complex than many adults ever face. They learn to read symptoms, catch warning signs early, and make decisions under pressure, always weighing risk against time. And yet, life is not lived only in hospitals. Families build their days around joy, planning meals rich in nutrients, encouraging light exercise to strengthen muscles and protect mobility, creating routines that help the body while protecting the spirit. They celebrate every inch of growth, every new hobby, every milestone that others take for granted. But perhaps the hardest lesson is the one every parent learns quietly: to treasure the present without letting fear swallow it. Psychologists often describe it as compressed childhood, a lifetime of love, laughter, school projects, and dreams packed into years that pass faster than anyone would like. Parents try to give their children a normal life, even when the disease refuses to cooperate. And the children, in return, often surprise the world with an emotional strength far beyond their age. In the end, these families don't just manage progeria, they redefine what it means to live fully, even when time is limited.
Progeria is one of the rarest diseases on Earth and one of the harshest. Yet its impact reaches far beyond the children it affects. It has revealed secrets about aging, guided scientists toward the inner mechanics of cellular decay, and opened the door to breakthroughs that may one day slow time itself. A condition born from a single mutation has changed how humanity understands life, death, and the fragile space in between. It is a story of pain, yes, but it is also a story of progress, determination, and hope. Because in trying to save a few children, science may someday learn how to save us all.